What's up, everybody? Anthony Cosenza here with my guy, John Sheeran, to talk to you all about a big Bengals dub. It was a little late last night, so my apologies. Normally, I do a post-game show and wrap that up, but it was just late, and I was doing a little more on the typing side last night for CincyJungle.com, so we didn't get to it, but we're going to talk about a lot of stuff today, breaking down this game, kind of wrap a little bit of the post-game show into our aftermath episode. Again, I'm Anthony. He is John. John, what's good, my brother?
It's going great, man. I had an intro planned out in case we had to audible. I'm okay not using it though, but I just wanted to ask, like, the audience, like, where were they, September 19th, 2004? Like, what was going on in their life? Because that was the last time the Bengals won a regular season Sunday night football game. Pat Summerall was on the call. That's how long ago it was.
Yeah, that's crazy. Unbelievable. I saw your picture that you put on Twitter about that, and I was like, wow, man, that crew, Paul McGuire, I think, and a long time coming. That is for sure. Sunday night has not been kind to the Bengals, and it's usually against teams that are like, they're big rivals and whatnot. This is becoming a big rivalry between these two teams, but this is kind of where I wanted to start the conversation, because we'll dive into the weeds and performances and all that kind of stuff a little bit too. But I had a thought last night, and then I saw Chris Sims, who does stuff for NBC Sports and Pro Football Talk, kind of take my thought and put it into a tweet. I had a thought last night, John, where I said, is this the Bengals just being a better all-around football team, a better, top to bottom, better, Burrow, you have your Burrow-Allen debate, which quarterback is better, and you just go across the board and you say the Bengals are just the better team? Or is it just, man, it's kind of like the Bengals and the Browns, where the matchup, the personnel, the style of play that Buffalo likes to do just does not match up well against the Bengals offense and what the Bengals defense is able to do, hit and harass Josh Allen?
It's a good question, because I think right now the Bills, just like the 49ers are when, last week happened, they're going through some type of a defensive crisis. And we talked about that. Matt Milano, Daquan Jones not being out there. It's completely altered, how well the Bills are doing. Like, Milano's impact is actually just quantifiably nuts. Honestly, like, the splits between him being out there and not is pretty big. But also, I think it was Sims who was talking about last night. The Bills just rarely go man-to-man with their cornerbacks. They like to stay back in zone, and that's just a death sentence when you have the Bengals offense playing the way that they're doing. So I think it's probably a little bit of both, honestly. Like, I think the Bengals they're probably just a tier above the Bills, honestly. And that's not like to take away anything from the Bills but they're going through some struggles right now. And I think Allen's just more prone to making those mistakes and maybe having more of a dud of a game compared to Burrow's more stable and consistency and everything like that. Even though we saw last night, there were a handful of moments where we're like, yeah, that's what Josh Allen can do if you just give him the tiniest amount of a window to throw it into. So I would say the Bengals are just slightly better than the Bills, but also, yeah, it's not the greatest matchup for them either.
It's not the greatest matchup. I will say, this felt to me, and I know this was a point you wanted to talk about. This game felt to me a lot like the 49ers game in a lot of different ways. The Bengals offense kind of having their way with the Bills and, the defense kind of stifling things. But it also, to me, John, again, this score did not indicate how close or not close that this game was. I felt that the Bengals had this pretty well handled around halftime. I just felt that they were just even with Jamar Chase being corralled a bit, um, the Bengals were just kind of doing what they wanted in this. And, I mean, there was a couple moments where you felt the Bills were moving, when Kincaid fumbled that ball in the red zone, they were kind of getting into score there. But for the most part, I felt that the Bengals just were completely in control of this game.
In a pretty positive way, Bengals games are becoming predictable. And it's good because I think for the most part, they're playing good football, but it's also a bit concerning in case the other team, starts to put their foot on the gas in parts where the Bengals are just kind of slacking a little bit. It's the opening script is typically called the first 15 plays of the opening 2 drives of the game. In the last 4 games, now 4 wins in a row for the Bengals, their opening scripts have resulted in 7 touchdowns and a field goal, right? And I don't know, there's not a label for the 2 drives that follow the opening script, but in drives 3 and 4 in the past 4 games, the Bengals have 6 punts, a missed field goal, and a fumble, right? They enter this lull after starting the game so hot. It gives them a cushion for their defense to play well enough and maintain that lead, but they keep running into these very, very, just unexplainable, like, just lulls with their offense. Now, last night, a lot of it was penalties, and particularly pre-snap, which is not a good thing to do especially when you're playing at home. It's honestly just inexcusable, and I'm sure the coaches kind of expressed that as well. But they play well enough on offense to start the game, where then they kind of disappear in the second and third quarter, but then they finish well if their defense allows them to hold the lead. Honestly, their offense is like the reverse of a bell curve, where like they start really well, they go down a little bit, and then they finish pretty well instead of like the standardized bell curve where it's kind of like up in the middle or whatever. So, yeah, it's just how it's been going for the past few weeks, and it's worked out. But I think they still need to hit that next level to really dominate the meat of these games in case the defense has a down week or so.
So this is what I thought. This was a game for a lot of people who were seeing a lot of good stuff in the chat here, who days and whatnot. This game for me, this was a game for the people who have been critical of Brian Callahan, Zach Taylor, and the way that there are still criticisms in this game. Some people thought that they should have been a little more aggressive on some of those 4th down plays, etc. But I feel like this was a game that was masterful in so many ways. You wanted to talk about the tight end performance, and we should, that group's performance, because it was pretty epic. I mean, it took a village, right? I mean, it was 3 of them that were combining to make plays there. But all the talk, again, the Bengals had a plan where, okay, you know what? Of course, we want to try and get the ball to Chase. Of course, we want to try and get T. Higgins involved. But Chase was bottled up, as we mentioned. And so that caused the Bengals to pivot. And they had good plans in place on those pivots. T. Higgins, 100-yard game, the 3 tight ends, 2 touchdowns, and over 100 yards receiving. So, I'd like to think that was at least an intentionally well laid out backup plan to Chase not doing what he has been doing. So for me, that puts a feather in the cap to the coaching staff, making some good adjustments and making sure that everybody was kind of primed and ready to go and ready to have their number called.
Man, I really wish they listened to this podcast so they just hear me just slander the crap out of the tight end room for the past week. I mean, who could have expected that, right? 101 yards, 10 receptions out of that trio. Drew Sample made a guy miss and scored a touchdown. He
almost stumbled. He almost stumbled. Did you see it?
He did almost stumble. But Irv Smith, I mean, like that corner around the end zone, that's why they signed him. Like the athleticism to separate there, and then the high point the ball, like that's textbook. That's what they've needed so desperately out of this position group. I think Tanner Hudson he obviously played very well. He had his opportunities, and I think he took advantage of just being on the roster now for the first time. But the first several weeks of the season, the problem was it was just Jamar Chase and no one else. Like it's not like they weren't giving T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd opportunities to be those complementary receivers. Unfortunately, Higgins just started the season slow. Boyd wasn't really that great either in the first few weeks, but this was a very confident T. Higgins out there. I think he was one of the best receivers this week against man coverage. He was dominant in those situations, and he had those one-on-one opportunities because Brian Callahan said that the Bills had a very aggressive plan to just contain Jamar Chase, and he had some troubles against Dane Jackson, who played phenomenally, but T. Higgins stepped up and Burrow apparently said that he was going to feed Higgins on that day, knowing, I don't know if he knew that, the gameplay would be to, just try to cap Chase like that. But if Higgins doesn't step up, then the offense, it looks a lot different. And if the tight ends don't play like they did, then it definitely looks a lot different. So it was the opposite of how the first, 5 or 6 weeks were, where it was just Chase making those plays and everyone else is just lacking behind him.
And then you hear Joe Burrow on the NBC telecast at the end when he's being interviewed. What's changed? What are you able to do now? He basically said with a chuckle, "Run. I'm able to run." And that's, again, we keep going back to, I don't think we really grasped just how hindered he was with this injury. And it looks to be behind him, thankfully, but he was tiptoeing out of sacks. It would be sacks again, and throwing on the run, throwing darts. And, again, what is it? 10 touchdowns, 2 interceptions on this, 4-game win streak that they've strung together here, and a big win in the conference. What do you make of I almost hesitate to ask you, but because I know how much you love talking about the run game and Joe Mixon and everything, but I feel like there are some very good plays that occurred. They're able to diversify, as we know, running out of shotgun and now doing some more stuff under center. The tosses that last night, there was probably about 3 of them that I'm like, just stop running those plays. Please stop running those plays. They aren't going anywhere. And then I kind of was a little bit surprised by this. I was doing a little bit of research on another little post I put together on Cincy Jungle, and the Bengals offense as a team have the least amount of total rushing yards in the league to this point. So, you go, well, I mean, obviously they're not getting huge yardage on the ground in this win streak, save for a game or two. So, it's working, but sustainability is something that, kind of creeps in your mind a little bit. I don't know. What do you make of just kind of all that verbiage I spewed at you there?
It was one of the most interesting parts of this game, I think, considering how different the plan was compared to against San Francisco, where they had a good amount of under center calls and under center runs. I think they ran under center maybe 2 times. It should have been 3, but one of them was a delay game, which again goes back to those pre-snap penalties. And I think one of them was the touchdown that Mixon scored on the second drive of the game. But you're right, there was 2 other under center runs, and they were both sweeps. And they both, I think, combined for -7 yards. Most of the runs were out of shotgun, and that was either Travion Williams or Joe Mixon. And I wasn't really sure why, because, again, the interior of the Bills' defensive line has been stricken with injuries. My only explanation was Linval Joseph coming off the couch that much of a detractor to not run up the middle? Were they just concerned that, they weren't going to get a lot of push against him whenever he was on the field? I suppose trying to attack the perimeter of the Bills defense, where, again, you don't have Matt Milano scraping over the top and making those plays. Maybe that was enticing to them. It was just interesting how different it was compared to last week. But just real quick, I want to go back to Burrow real quick because you brought him up and what he was talking about after the game. NBC was 50% for me in terms of how they handled the whole discourse, because I love the fact that they showed an actual clip of him not being able to step off of that foot against the Rams a few weeks back compared to him stepping into throws in this game, because he's always talked about I can't move and everything, but he's yet to really admit that it has impacted his ability to push off of that foot, or at least that was the case when he was injured. So I'm glad they showed that difference. But I think NBC also dropped the ball by showing that he had his calf compression device, whatever, to continually heat it up, and they brought it up like it was news, he would re-aggravate or something like that, instead of just him just doing that as general maintenance for the entire season. So NBC got it half right, in my opinion.
I saw the device there, and I figured that's something that he just kind of continued to do to make sure that there's no setbacks and whatnot. But he, as the weeks have gone on, for sure, he has looked more and more like his old self, dancing out of sacks, dancing away from pressure, throwing on the run and making great throws, taking very, very good care of the football too. No interceptions the last couple games, right? And he's just, I don't know, he's just playing at a very, very high level, and the team needs him to. Also playing at a high level, though, John, is the defense. And there was a little bit of a time where you're like, oh, man, maybe this is where Buffalo surges a little bit. And then, they just – Jermaine Pratt, Johnny on the spot, just knocks the ball out of Kincaid's hand. Wasn't even – I mean, he was kind of stumbling, so I guess there's just,
he flipped over Nick Scott.
Yeah, so. Yeah. I don't think – what I'm trying to say is I didn't see that as him being just like utterly careless with the ball. It just was like this weird sequence of events. Pratt just barely gets his hand in there and hit it right at the precise spot that he could hit it to knock that thing out. The Bengals get it back. So I don't know, defensive performance. I think Myles Murphy had a couple of nice moments last night. So that was encouraging. A little quiet elsewhere, but I mean, Allen was hit. He was pressured here and there, and defense did what they needed to do.
Yeah, if this is like a newfound development of them starting fast and then having these problems in the second and third quarter, like what the defense has continued to do has been going on a lot longer than that development for the offense. It's like they might give up a touchdown to begin the drive. Lou Narumo might throw out a look or some type of a coverage or whatever the case may be early in the game, and he'll go off of that and maybe disguise it a little bit better, or maybe do something different off of the same look. And that ends up working out as the game kind of progresses. The Bills offense, I think, struggled to score for most of this game up until the very end. Like, they had a chance to get it into the end zone. They had to settle for a field goal kind of in the third quarter. And then they finally found the end zone again, when unfortunately for them, it was a little bit too late because the Bengals ran out the clock on the ensuing drive. But it might be a slow start, but like that, people are going to look at that Kincaid fumble as luck, but it's just what they do. Like, at this point, it's just, it can't be explained other than it's just who they are. And it's just, you can almost just rely on something like that, which again, for 31 other teams seems ludicrous. Like, turnovers are mostly luck in the grand scheme of things, but man, like it's just happened so goddamn constantly. You just have to just expect it at this point. And at the worst case scenario, they just hold them to a field goal there because, again, their red zone defense has just been locked down. Jermaine Pratt is arguably the most clutch player in Bengals history. You can just always expect him to be in the right place at the right time. I do feel a little bit bad for Nick Scott, though, because he did make the play. He initially got the credit, but the replay did show that Jermaine Pratt knocked the ball out. So good play by Nick Scott. Still want him to get his flowers because he's been kind of a whipping dog for them.
Yeah. Pratt, I mean, just think about all the hustle plays that turned into turnovers. I mean, you can go back to last year and the play on Kelsey that he chases him down on a big gainer, knocks it out in that regular season game. Obviously, he was in there on the Ravens playoff game that caused the fumble in the jungle, the rumble in the jungle, that sort of thing. And I want to bring this up. We got a couple of comments here, one of which is a YouTube super chat. So thank you very much. Iron Man XRP points out our defense averages about 2 turnovers a game. And then Victor Pate, thank you so much. We see you a lot in here. Appreciate your support, man. Appreciate it. Offensive strategy is to get a lead with as few plays as possible and hold on. Okay, so going back to, they kind of tie into each other a little bit here. Going back to that, what the Bengals defense is averaging turnover-wise and that sort of thing. They are one of the top teams in the league in interceptions. That I think they've got 11 now after yesterday. So they're in the top, I think 3 or 4. Yeah, I was asked about, I think we talked about it last week. I was asked from the Bills side of things, Matthew Byam on Buffalo Rumblings and SB Nation's deal. We exchanged the 5 questions, and he's just kind of saying, why is the defense that there was a narrative out there that the Bengals defense was struggling because they were letting up a lot of rushing yards and, sometimes a little, some points. And obviously the offensive struggles early in the year kind of put them in bad positions. They got tired. They were out there too often. We know the deal. But again, I just think even though the cast of characters is largely the same, you don't have, your other starting safeties from the last couple of years, John. I feel like this is a defensive unit that instead of, hey, we're going to just kind of stifle you and force a punt. It's not it's some of that, but it's more we'll bend, but we're gonna come back with this big play to change the game. And that's really kind of who they've become a bit more this year, as opposed to the prior 2 years where it was a little bit more either sack the quarterback or get off the field and get a punt. It's more turnovers, it feels like, this year.
It's a great example of you just need to watch the tape. And like I think the numbers definitely paint the Bengals defense in a worse light. If you just looked at the success rate, the EPA per play, and those are legitimate issues that I think are worthy of bringing up. But when you consistently make those game changing plays that prevent points from going on the board, it adds a lot more of context and nuance to the situation. And I think also, last night was not necessarily the case because they only sacked Allen, I think, once, but they've been also finishing at the quarterback more often. It's kind of gone away in the past couple of weeks, and they need to make sure that gets picked back up. But just actually finishing plays at the ball in terms of just interceptions and recovering fumbles and everything like that's been just such a needed development for this defense to continue what it's been doing for the past couple of years, because they've made continuously red zone stops, and like you said, they're allowing drives to particularly down the field, and that leads to a decent success rate allowed, but preventing points from going on the board and stopping them at the right time and stopping them in parts of the game where it needs to happen, like that's consistently been counted on. That's why they have the reputation that they have.
Yeah, but another great performance, another stifling performance on Josh Allen, who man, I mean, these last 2.5 games, 2.25 games, I guess, it just looks like the Bengals just kind of have their number a little bit, and we'll see if these two teams meet in the playoffs. I think the Bills have a lot of talent, and you can make arguments about who's got maybe the more talented roster. Obviously, the wins and the way that Bengals have won kind of tips the scales in their favor in terms of talent, like we talked about earlier. But I have I just worry about the lasting power for the Bills if I'm a Bills fan, because they just have, like we talked about, all the injuries they've had. They just have injuries to just very, very important players. And, that kind of shit, when you play a quality team, that tends to show up a little bit more. And it kind of appeared that way last night in some respects.
Yeah, it's like a problem that they've had is that they've needed other guys aside from Stephon Diggs to step up, and I think Diggs played well in the few chances that he had. There was a couple of I think Chidway Wuzie played his best game of the season so far, and he had some good moments against Diggs. But other than Diggs, like, it was just there's just not a lot there. I think Kincaid's a great addition, but I think they're missing Dawson Knox a little bit. They still need more consistency out of the wide receiver position aside from him. Like you said, man, like the injuries are just not ideal for them, and I think Milano's absence is really amplifying what his true value is, and the fact that they just need more answers at cornerback, and they're just not really going to walk through that door. Rasul Douglas is just unfortunately not enough when you're facing one of the best offenses in the league.
Yeah. Well, let's talk this. We'll talk about this element here. We spoke about how the Bengals tight ends had a nice evening collectively, as you kind of said, 10 catches, over 100 yards, 2 touchdowns from the group, a little bit of everything from 3 different guys. I guess I'm curious if you think that this was kind of a single game event, or if this is something where you're going to start seeing them, particularly now, Jamar Chase. He landed awkwardly and hard last night on his back, and now he and Zach Taylor said today that he's day to day, but Chase seemed a little bit more like in pain, or just a little bit disappointed, I guess. Collinsworth said when he saw that play happen, he's, oh man, he's going to feel that rolling out of bed tomorrow. So, I mean, I guess, do you see this maybe not this type of performance week to week, but do you see them now kind of finding a groove with this group and getting them implemented more in the coming weeks?
That's a good question, because I feel like just looking ahead at the defenses that they're about to face, the Ravens have arguably the best defense in the NFL. Texans, I don't know about them, but I wouldn't expect, obviously, Smith and Sample to score both in the same game again necessarily, but no, the game that Irv Smith had last night, it's replicable, and the fact that he was just so far below expectation, I think, is almost skewed the perception of it. It certainly happened for me, just because that was just the product that he was putting out onto the field. But I think it was like 3 receptions for 25 yards and 4 targets, so like that's definitely doable. Just take advantage of those chances when you have them, and they put him in decent spots to succeed. Tanner Hudson is who Tanner Hudson is at this point. He's just a reliable receiver who finds the soft spots of the zones. He's able to get yards after the catch. Having both of those guys work off of each other and just maybe rotate in and out of the game, especially because you have Hudson who lines that more out wide compared to Irv Smith, who's still more like closer to the formation or almost like an inline guy. I think both of those guys complementing each other works pretty well. I don't even know if I want to call Drew Sample a tight end anymore. He's essentially just Samaje Perine out there right now. And if that works for him, then perfect, because they just haven't really replaced Perine up until this point. I don't know if they should throw to him so much out of the backfield. I feel like there was just one too many times where that happened. But if he has just acres of space to get a touchdown again, might as well just see what he can do.
Yeah, he's kind of a hybrid player, a little bit of an H-back tight end, and does a number of different things. Pass protects. You saw them move around a lot of those players, Sample and I think Trayvon Williams a couple times too. They would adjust pre-snap to have them get in there for pass protection. So they're just. I guess what I like the most out of this game, aside from just the general, a win in the conference, and that was a team you're jockeying with playoff position wise, but Bill Belichick is a guy who thrives on, I'm going to take away your bet, what you do best, what your best player, that's how he's built his entire, coaching reputation as a defensive mind. I'm going to take that away from you. Now, what are you going to do? Well, the Bengals, like I said, Chase was not really a factor in this game, and they were able to find different ways and find answers and still remain effective, still remain potent on offense, and not really miss too much of a beat. Obviously, you want to see everybody thriving and doing well in the game, but I like their pivot. I like their pivot onto other players and their ability to adjust and still find a way to get a really solid win.
Yeah. And people are going to talk about it because we've seen it so often. We've even talked about it as well, like the points left on the board. I still think that if this continues to happen like this, where they just had games that kind of go like this, it's almost just becomes who they are. I think they do get some leeway though, just because they had 3rd and inches and then they had a delay game, and then it just ended up being like 4th and 20 or something like that. Then they have to punt, like those situations.
Oh, that was a maddening sequence of events. Yeah,
you're not expecting that, especially at home when that's supposed to be into your advantage. So that's also just a weird phenomenon that's happening that definitely needs to get cleaned up before the playoffs come here. So those issues I think can be fixed, and then they can lead to a higher scoring output and everything like that. But yeah, if they had scored 30 points while Jamar Chase dropped a touchdown, couldn't connect with Burrow on a deep ball, and they only had like 40 yards in the game, like that's scary for the rest of the NFL for sure.
Yeah. Well, things are looking up for the Bengals. They have a sneaky game this week coming up, John. I don't want to say, because this team has shown, unlike other good Bengals teams in the past, where they tend to they could have overlooked a team or something like that. I never liked this stretch of games right here, where it was the Niners, it was the Bills on primetime, and then a week and a half from now, you got the big Thursday night clash against the Ravens, who you're going to be trying to jockey to get back in control of the AFC North. And oh, by the way, here come the Houston Texans to town with CJ Stroud, who just set a single game rookie record for passing yards. So Texans all around, you look at their team, it's not, they're overachieving at 4-4, in my opinion, but I don't like this game being plopped right in the middle of those 3 other games that I mentioned. And especially with Stroud looking like the real deal, I just don't like it. So hopefully the Bengals can kind of keep things in front of them and continue to play well.
We can talk about this more on Thursday. It's going to be a tough game. It's definitely, like, I think we've all kind of circled this as like the quintessential trap game. But the Texans were always that team to me that's like they can definitely compete for 500 this year if Stroud ends up doing decent. And he's been way more than decent, right? This is a huge opportunity for this Bengals defense, which again, like you said, has this narrative. Okay, like they're giving up a ton of yards, they're putting themselves in precarious situations, but they're digging themselves out of that hole with plays at the right time. Stroud may not give them that chance because he's playing lights out.
Yeah, he is playing very, very well right now. And this goes to Victor's back to the super chat real quick, saying offensive strategies get a lead with as few plays as possible and then hold on. Yeah, I mean, they're going to want to get this early lead in this one. And then, force things to kind of maybe become a little bit more one-dimensional, which does not go well with what they want, what the Texans want to do. We're going to start getting out of here, though. We're going to do a little bit of a shortened one. We've got more episodes, and we'll try and get you maybe a Friday episode as well, if we are able. But I want to remind folks, if you are new here, welcome. We've got a lot of viewers on a lot of different platforms where we stream live. So good to see you on the Cincy Jungle Facebook page, the YouTube channel, on Twitter as well. I think they now do. John, when you stream to live to Twitter, it creates a spaces, which is, I found that kind of interesting. So we're on the Cincy Jungle Twitter account. There's spaces, so check that out. Also, if you're new here, thank you for checking us out. If you've been with us for a long time, appreciate that as well. If you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, do so at the show icon underneath John by the Cincy Jungle icon. You can click the bell to be notified when we go live, when new content is available. Of course, give a thumbs up to the videos. We appreciate all of that. And if you like the audio side of things, you can get the Cincy Jungle podcast channel complete with our shows on the Orange and Black Insider, Talking Football with Bengal Jim and Friends, the coach, Matt Minnick's Coach Speak and Chalk Talk, and then, of course, 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin, all of those on your favorite audio streamer, whether that's iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, now Amazon Music. I think we're on there, so go check that out and give us a subscribe and a review there as well. But Bengals get a big win at home. I think it's a statement to the rest of the league, John. And it was that place looked awesome too. How they decked it out, and it was rocking.
It did look like stripes. I am very impressed.
I'm surprised that they pulled it off well. But thank you, everybody. Thank you, John. And we'll be back later this week to preview the Texans game, talk about all kinds of different stuff with that. And we will see you soon. Take care, bud.
See you guys.